another episode of what we have called the Parks and Bennis podcast. We were just discussing before we started this what episode it is. I believe from my sources now it's episode 6 of the Parks and Bennis podcast. Started the back end of last season discussing the football results, different things to do with football, and now we have gone into the summer post-season review, and we're going to talk about what's happening in the middle of a pre-season, where the biggest talking point is Blackpool going 3-0 up after 10 minutes against Everton. So for today with Aaron, I'm delighted to be joined by a good friend of mine, producer of a podcast, Terry McAllister. How are you doing, Terry?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no worries at all. Did you watch Everton yesterday?
No, I haven't got the membership. I'm not paying that for a couple of pre-season games, especially when we know exactly how they go and you get 30 minutes when you're behind the paywall and then it crashes. I didn't bother. For me, the pre-season friendlies are for the manager and rather than the fans. And frankly, he saw a lot from that game, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know. I did watch, and the main reason that I decided to stick with it throughout is because I've got a Darren Griffiths and Ian Snowden cliche bingo, and so I just tick them off as we go along. He'd be just talking major nonsense, so I'm not at liberty to say anything more. But the first thing, Aaron, how's the championship going? How's the start of the preparation to second division football?
Very exciting, actually.
Yeah.
New coach. Hopefully we actually stick with this guy.
Yeah. Well, we had talked about Vladimir Ivic on the last pod. We were just our oracles essentially then, because we just guessed it would be Vladimir Ivic and not Gerhard Struber.
We totally didn't go with what the bookies were saying.
No, we totally didn't. We totally didn't say Paul Cook was in the running either. But yeah, things have moved on since Watford have got a new coach. Everton still haven't bought anyone, but they have been linked with a certain Abdul like the Corte with 4 accents and 9 O's and whatever. And so the first thing we should talk about before anything else to do with the summer transfer window and whatnot is the situation with Harry Maguire. Luke Reevy at Luke_Reevy, I think that's how I'm pronouncing it on Twitter, but in light of the Guardian's labelling of Harry Maguire a model citizen after his actions in Greece, what do you think about the way the media treats footballers differently depending on the colour of their skin? We've got one image here with Harry Maguire's case and the sort of disputing it, and a image of model professional with all white skin tones and a footy idiot with darker skin tones, and then on the next one is just tabloid headlines of certain black footballers' treatment in the papers. So I'll start with you on this one, Terry. What have you made of Harry Maguire, and what do you think it tells us about where modern day football and sports news sit?
I'm not surprised at all by the media. I mean, they're like that with everything. It's not just football, is it? I mean, look at the way they act with the royal family. Like, for example, like Meghan Markle comes out with some, pretty, safe, run-of-the-mill, statements about Donald Trump, and because they're perceived to be like liberal-leaning like thoughts and like statements, she gets lambasted. Whereas, Prince Andrew, another royal, is, potentially involved in some very, shall we say, allegedly involved in some distasteful things with Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. And the coverage between the difference in the coverage between the both is massively different, and that extends to right across, it's the red top media, isn't it? It's just the way they are. I mean, that journalism is what I've got a degree in journalism, and I studied basically the different slants that the UK media especially put on different like news stories, like Madeleine McCann's disappearance compared to Shannon Matthews and what have you. That was more based on class, but It's always been this way, but you know what? People blame the newspapers. They'd stop doing it overnight if the people wouldn't buy it. They're playing the hits to their base, to their audience, and the country is unfortunately getting more and more like that than it ever has been, where they're more inclined to think along those lines. So Raheem Sterling, bought his mum a nice sink, wasn't it? And he got absolutely, leathered for it. And Harry Maguire has been accused of, fighting police officers up on holiday. Proper, England player. Sounds like a lot of England fans. That's the type of stuff we see when we go away to tournaments. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all, and I don't see it ever changing. If I'm honest, it's got to, hope it does. But I'd be surprised if it ever does. It's not good.
Yeah, I'm also currently studying sports journalism, and for certain units we discuss very much similar things about how the media behave and such like. But none of this surprised me. Harry Maguire, the way he behaved was he on holiday in Greece?
Yeah, holiday in Greece.
Yeah. It's just indicative of how the country we've become, that a rich white footballer can get away with things other people can't, and that's not just making assumptions about certain people, the way they behave. It's just simply that there seems to be one rule for one section of the population and another rule for everybody else. But whether he'll get away with it, we're unsure of this case. I believe those allegations of bribery for police officers.
Yeah. So apparently, allegedly, that wasn't Maguire. That was one of his friends. But you don't know, do you? It'll all come out because he's going back. Well, I don't know if he's going back, but the trial will be soon, won't it? It won't take months and months. So it'll all come out in that, and it'll be reported upon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good, isn't it? You're going to be unhappy if you're Man United's top brass.
Honestly, it's just getting tiring now watching all these newspapers talking one way about white people, one way about black people. It's blatant racism. It's blatant racism. The images Luke sent are all by the Sun, and from the Sun I'd expect nothing less. It's really again. I'm starting uni in September, doing journalism, and if I had to write anything along these lines, I'd just consider getting a degree a complete waste of time.
Well, there's also some good journalism out there, and certainly not anything to do with any affiliations towards the Sun newspaper, and I can't stress that enough. Have we got anything else to add on Maguire, do you think? Where do you think he goes from here now?
I wouldn't expect him to retain the captaincy at Man United. I think that was already a topic that was on the table. A lot of supporters want it taken off him because they think he's not playing well enough to merit it, and he's not showing leadership on the pitch. Whether that cuts any ice with the manager is obviously a different topic, but now he's forced the issue, hasn't he? So I can see it having taken off him as punishment and possibly given to even Bruno Fernandes.
How long has he been at Man United?
Another question asked was from Ben Chapman.
Yeah.
He asked, will he be sacked as United captain now? And I haven't watched United regularly, but he doesn't strike me as a United captain. But in all honesty, they don't have many leaders whatsoever at that club, so it's a really interesting situation.
Yeah, I think it's a case of wait and see, because for as much as we moan Maguire, he's only been at Man U a year, hasn't he?
Yeah.
That's a pretty short space of time for someone who's come into the football club who isn't great, if we're being honest. He's not elite in his position. He hasn't really done much, in my opinion, in terms of anything that's should have made him captain within a year. And yet there he is. I think Bruno Fernandes has had much more of a bigger impact on Man U than Paul Pogba. I feel like he's more of a catalyst of how they do, more than Harry Maguire, not Paul Pogba. So I think it's the case of, I think it was the wrong decision in the first place to give him captain even with all this.
Problem is, like I said, I'm looking through United squad, and I just don't see any players that are captain material.
That's an issue. maybe Marcus Rashford, I suppose the thing he was taking on the government over the free school meals and that. I know that's not really football related, but it shows some sense of leadership.
Yeah, it depends what type of captain you want, really. You can have a captain who, leads by example, so he always has to be the best player, or you can have someone who's a personality captain, he leads the dressing room, and you don't really know, who those players are. You think you do, but, you see up and down the league, like, just look at Everton. Guthrie Sigurdsson keeps getting the captain's armband, and you can't see on the pitch why, but he must be getting it for a personality reason behind the scenes. And but with Maguire, he didn't just get it within a year, he got it within a couple of months. He'd only been there 2, maybe even 3 months, and he was given the captaincy. And I agree with Roy Keane at the time. He said, I think that speaks volumes for the players who are already there, that a new player can be captain immediately. Shows that there's no proper leaders in there. So I don't know, I think he will take it off him. I like that shout of Rashford. If you're going to give it to him, I wouldn't give it to Fernandes. He's probably he's probably not put a dent in his couch in his house since he's been there. He's been so so new to the football club, whereas Rashford's come through. He's part of the sort of heritage of Man United, like academy kid, and he's also built himself up as a person when like you said, when he took on the government. But it just depends what goes on off the pitch. You don't see what's going on, because I've said this about shouts for changing the Everton captain before. Like, I've listened to the Peter Crouch podcast once, and he said that most English clubs, the captaincy is a very big role behind the scenes. Like, they give out the fines to players who are late for training and stuff like that, so you can't just dish that out to any player you want. They might not want to do that, they might not want to organise the Christmas party, they might not want to introduce new signings around the training ground when they come in. It's very much a full time role, rather than just I put the armband on the match day.
Yeah.
Thing is, right, I kind of feel for Harry Maguire in some ways, because let's not be funny here. He was a very decent defender for Leicester. He's quite clearly a good defender, but he's come in. They paid a ridiculous transfer fee. Obviously, he's not worth that, but it's not his fault. He's come in 2-3 months. He's already been captain, so there's already so much pressure on. Firstly, a record transfer for a defender, but ultimately, I just don't think he's really suited to that system. And I'm watching him at Leicester. They played a deeper line. He had space in front of him to run into and to carry the ball. He doesn't get that at United. It's showing he's not quick either, so that doesn't help the high line. So he's not been helped whatsoever.
No, I totally agree. When he was at Leicester before that, when he was at Hull especially, I wanted Everton to sign him, because I thought he was a decent defender, and I thought at that point we were signing Michael Keane, and I thought I was really against Ashley Williams. I remember at the time starting that season as our second choice centre back. So I think Maguire was going to Leicester for about 15 million. I thought Keane and Maguire, they're two traditional leaders at the back. Well, not Keane, but he was captain of Burnley, I think. Or he was some leader at the back, and Maguire, thought they might have been two defenders who could grow the club with. We ended up only bringing in Michael Keane and I think Mangala and loan in the January, who lasted about 4 weeks before getting shipped back or something full of injury. So I remember wanting to sign him. I just think with Maguire, it's this thing, and it's what the whole collective country has done, and it's ticked the bingo off again. Eddie Howe, he was this amazing manager for so long. He was played the right way. He was the next England manager for so many people for so long that in the end it catches up with them when they're not that good. And this isn't anything to do with Maguire's performance. I just think everything that's happened to him in the last 18 months, I feel like might have just caught up with him, saying he's sort of reached his limit of what he is right now. And I think this incident only sort of speeds it up that he might be getting found out, and we'll see how he does on the pitch. But it's just an interesting case I thought about looking into Harry Maguire. So as to them, we'll move on. Before I'm going to start the next question on recruitment, I do have a question. Have either of you listened to the High Performance podcast with Sean Dyche?
I haven't, no.
No.
Well, I was going to start by saying he talks a lot about recruitment and personalities at the start of that. And yeah, it was very good. He talks about sort of attitudes and their collective spirit amongst certain players who come in. So even if a player down the line. So let's say if Burnley now Ben Mee, he will sort of teach the Burnley way to a new centre back comes in, and then he'll pick the mantle up and he'll carry on. That's what he was talking about on that podcast. So that's the one recruitment strategy that, as everyone knows, I'm a big fan of. But Andy El Pavote FTB El Pavote Andy on Twitter has put, which non-UK teams recruitment strategy do you admire the most? Aaron, I'm going to start off with you.
When I first saw that question, the first club that came to mind was Borussia Dortmund. They're a big selling club, but they recruit such good players and they're willing to give these players a chance. I think Jadon Sancho is a perfect example. He came through the Watford Academy. Man City picked him up when he was 14, 15. He didn't really get a chance at Man City, and Jadon Sancho was willing to leave for Dortmund, but ultimately Dortmund were the ones that gave him the chance. And he's gone from strength to strength since signing. He's become one of the world's brightest young talents. Just off the top of my head, the players they've had in the past, Robert Lewandowski, they've still got Marco Reus. So I'm a big fan of the way Borussia Dortmund recruit.
Yeah, for Dortmund for years, ever since Klopp's been there, always struck me as a team as like a trendsetter. So they've started this new sort of era of buying really good players for cheap and having like a sell-on sort of. Southampton did it for a bit, but they couldn't really recreate it as much as what Dortmund have done, and on a higher level, where no matter what managers really at Dortmund or different players, they just keep the same system going, and they don't really have much success in overtaking Bayern Munich. But they do what they do really well, and they're certainly one. But at the moment too, is really they were really the trendsetters for everything else that seems to have come with football and modern recruitment strategy. In my opinion, there might have been others before then, but the first one that springs to mind when I've been supporting football is Borussia Dortmund. Terry, do you have one?
Yeah, it was going to be a Borussia Dortmund. I was banking on Aaron and yourself saying something like Red Bull, so I think I'll say Red Bull to change it up, but it was going to be Dortmund. Red Bull, obviously, it's the go-to answer, and it's the stock answer, because they've just got a conveyor belt of talent. But that's because they've, it's no secret they've got the other clubs in different, different federations, and you make the step up from into Salzburg, and if you perform there, you can move on to Leipzig, and they brought Howard Adams over from New York Red Bulls. It's not just the recruitment for them, it's just setting up 4 or 5 elite level academies in different parts of the world, funneling through all the best talent into hoovering up talent in those geographical areas, and then just moving them throughout your sort of like tier system. So that Huang Hee-chan has just gone from Salzburg to Leipzig, hasn't he? Everton were linked with him. Yeah. As I said, Tyler Adams has come from New York Red Bulls, and then they'll sell those players on to much bigger clubs. Upamecano's being linked around like the top clubs in Europe now, and a few English clubs as well. It's just a fantastic model. It absolutely, masters financial fair play, because you're getting players that, if you're only buying more or less exclusively from your, affiliate clubs, then you're not going to have to overpay, are you? They're always going to get reasonable prices. To be honest, the best, I think, recruitment strategy isn't even foreign. I think it's Andy asked which outside of England, so it's going to be one of them. But I think it's Chelsea. Legitimately, if it's good, I try not to include English clubs, but I think Chelsea, the fact that they've just got this farm of players, it's not not great. People don't like it, but I think if you support Chelsea and you've got a dozen players all out on loan who are getting like 3 million to 6 million a pop in fees and getting their wages paid, there's a reason Chelsea can go and splurge all this money now. It's because they get a lot of incoming money, and not a lot of that's commercial. A lot of it's just from their sort of farming system. So I think the best would probably be Chelsea's in terms of the health of their own club, if not the players themselves. But abroad, it'd probably be Dortmund and then Leipzig / the Red Bull model.
Yeah, I'm going to offer a slightly different answer to both of them and say not as much a recruitment model, because I don't think they're as set sort of strict pathway to it, but in terms of what they've done on sort of the expenditure of what they've got, Atalanta is a team that I'm really enamoured with at the moment, and people kept on bringing up they don't play the style of football I tend to go on about a lot, but they have what they've done and what they're on their budget, and some of the players that they brought in from certain clubs as well, you wouldn't necessarily have thought that they're good players, but you've brought them into a system that will work. So I'm going to touch upon Martin de Roon, who was brought from Middlesbrough. He's just an example of many players who have gone to Atalanta who necessarily before wouldn't have been household names, but he's managed to get this scouting system of players who the chief have come in and they got to the later stages of the Champions League. So they're definitely one for me who I think everyone should really look at and say that's the way of doing things. I think the other teams like Lille as well, who maybe not had the success Atalanta have had, who just have really efficient systems. But we shall move on from recruitment, I feel. Have you got anything else to add about any of them teams, Atalanta or anyone?
I don't really like new teams, right? I will add to the Red Bull one. I did consider Red Bull, and when I was looking, when we were being with Gerard Struber, I found that they have a similar sort of approach when it comes to coaches. Struber came out to the youth teams for moving on to, well, he didn't go to the senior team, but he came out through the different like youth academies. So it's credit to them the way that they work with their players and the coaches.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many smart systems in place around Europe and in England that some teams who just spend like Everton really essentially, they just look stupid when there's so many other teams who have clear plans, and then you see Everton just get linked with spending money, well not spending money, but like getting linked with Ivanovic and Thiago Silva, thinking that's going to work. And it's just laughable really when you look at these teams who've got clear pathways, clear plans, and you look at the shame teams in England like Everton, who I think, did you see Terry that Everton have like the 12th most expensive squad or something like that? And it's just...
I saw that towards the end of last season, wasn't the least bit surprised. We know better than we were before we spent any of that money.
Yeah, and so these expensive models, what we've been, and I think Newcastle wanted to do the same with like the new owners. If they were going to get that, just spend loads of money and get in a Hollywood manager and that without having any sort of plan. And I feel like there has to be a change in what people are doing, because you see it yourself with people on Twitter when people say like, I've got my eyes and I don't need to look at stats and whatever when you come to signing players. Whereas I think that's the exact thing that's got clubs in a bad situation in the past. So that, I don't know if you saw on Twitter over the weekend, there was a poll for Everton fans in 2017, like, who would you rather, Everton Banega or Gylfi Sigurdsson, and like 80% said Gylfi Sigurdsson. And now 3 years later or wherever, everyone's like moaning we got Sigurdsson and not Banega because he was brilliant, Banega and that. So I feel like Everton, especially at that point, was definitely guilty of that, just buying players of what they thought would do better than looking at some data and some analysis of who would do what for their team, like these teams have done.
Probably about to do it again as well.
Yeah, probably.
There's no sign of that stopping.
No. The Corsai's coming in, so we've got no issues whatsoever.
And you don't learn to spell his name, please.
Oh, it's hilarious.
I don't understand how they get to Corey wrong. I get Abdullah wrong more often than I get to Corey wrong, but whatever. I've added it to my phone just to make sure I wasn't guilty of it.
Yeah, well, it's been something that's made me laugh for a while. I think the first person that really was guilty of this, Aaron, was the famous John Joe Kenny FC. on Twitter. It was a different spelling every time we put it in.
Completely different player when you think about it.
Yeah, it was. I think the incorrect spelling was like a third division French player in the end. It was just got silly with him. But now we're going to ask a question. Well, answer a question from the Looks Good on Paper podcast. And on time of recording this, the Champions League final is underway, and so the winner's not going to be known until you don't know, but we won't know while we're filming. So if you could bring one player who's going to play in the Champions League final to Goodison or Watford, who would it be and why, Teddy?
I think you're supposed to answer a player who would slot into a position in which you're weak, but it's Mbappe. we need centre midfielders. We need right backs, right midfielders. Don't care. Mbappe's on that list. It's got to be in. You'd be absolutely stupid not to.
Yeah, he's really a really good player. Yeah, for some reason though, I look at the situation that we really need a good centre midfielder, and any of them midfielders I'm looking at now would just be miles better than what we've got at Everton. Aaron, who would you?
I'm going to go with the mentality of we've got a terrible defence, so let's just go all out and try and score as many goals as possible. So I want to choose Robert Lewandowski.
I would love Robert Lewandowski at Everton. I think he's really one of the most underrated strikers in the last 10 years in terms of his goal turn and really the recognition he gets for it. He's got a really ridiculous record. I think he's got like 30 goals in most seasons, if not more.
I've said he's the best striker in the world for quite a while now.
Yeah, he's immense, but for some reason I remember last summer it was a particular fan. I can't remember if it was on Instagram or Twitter, most probably Instagram when they tell you what was said, but this person said that Anthony Martial was better than Robert Lewandowski. I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff.
Come up with that sort of opinion.
I have no idea. I think it was in one of our famous group chats, Alan.
Definitely Instagram.
Yeah. If it wasn't for that ash cloud, he'd be playing for Big Sam at Blackburn, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
You'd really see what he's made of then.
You've only.
They do it on a cold Tuesday night to Stoke.
Yeah. He would have got Blackburn to the top four, and Big Sam would have took all the credit, and Terry would have died inside.
I liked Big Sam till he came to Everton. I even sort of half like him again now. I just don't want him at Everton.
That's a really interesting one. But talking about recruitment strategy, Sam Allardyce is Blackburn, but obviously ahead of the game there. No one else was on to Robert Lewandowski.
Yeah, there's some scout at Blackburn who's never got the recognition he deserves, has he?
No. I'm surprised Allardyce hasn't said it was him who was doing all the scouting, because all the tall tales would come.
Give it time.
Yeah. There's a Talk Sport breakfast episode coming up where he might do that, I'm sure.
Only place you can get away with that sort of thing is Talk Sport.
Yeah. God, they've been informed recently, TalkSport, haven't they? Just nonsense after nonsense.
Yeah.
Dreadful station.
Was it TalkSport or BT Sport the other day that put that thing up? Everton managing 2017, Ronald Koeman now managing Barcelona, and Carlo Ancelotti was at Bayern Munich, and now he's at Everton. I failed to see any sort of link.
It's got no correlation whatsoever.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous, but we move on. Another question we've got before we go into the final segment, which will be on football tactics and sort of trends, and that is from Steve Leary, who says, will there ever be a future footballer born who can swim faster than the shark, Teddy?
Probably Erling Haaland's eventual kid, because see how fast he ran in that run he made before, prior to lockdown, where he nearly broke the land speed records and he was running in football boots. I'm sure if he took the water, he'd give a shark a good go. So it might be his son if he's even faster than he is.
I'm pretty sure Yannick Bolasie, when he was playing at Goodison for Palace then a few years, would have gave that a run for its money because he tore us to pieces every time we came to Goodison. And then he's at Goodison now with Mike Moran. He's coming off the bench in a free throw with Blackpool pre-season. How life comes at you fast. Aaron, what would you say? Is there a footballer who can swim faster than a shark?
Ismail
Assar, there we go.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to 150 people who answered the survey on my Instagram story, Bernard Duarte is better than Ismail Assar. So,
don't worry, they also said Andre Gomez is better than Etienne Capoue.
I know. So, did you see all the answers to that? There was some absolute lunacy. There was 280 people who said Eddie Howe was a better gaffer than Sean Dyche. And
all of them. Completely mad.
Yeah, there was more as well. I could just get them up. I don't think you've seen this, Terry, but on my Everton Instagram page, I just run the loads of like who's better or what's better, etc. And some of the responses people gave to them were just mad. But anyway,
I was probably the one saying the Bernard one. I was a Bernard loyalist for a long time.
Bernard loyalist. To be fair, I like Bernard as well when he was playing in like the 4-3-3. But
did you say he was your best player at one point?
Technically gifted last summer, I would have said he was one of our better players. Yeah.
Yeah, he's, you know what it is. He can drop his shoulder, and that's quite impressive. If Everton, you're just like, ooh, that's good. And then when you realise he's not scoring any goals or assisting any goals, you go, oh, okay then. But I think it's unfair, personally, to compare Capoue and Gomez. I think Gomez should be compared to Doucouré, and I'm now at the point where I bloody hope Doucouré is better than him.
Yeah, no, don't worry. He's far better than Andre Gomez.
I hope so.
Well, what I was just going to say, we're talking about what I said last summer. Please not hope that we're going to get Alfie in the comments with this Fulham prediction he made 3 years ago. That he predicted Fulham to finish 16th.
Can we make it clear he's changed his mind and said he keeps saying he predicted them to get relegated?
Yeah, he's talking nonsense. I also said, by the way, that it would be Gylfi Sigurdsson who would fall out of our team. He's still in it, but he should have been out of it. So
you should have been right at this point, but you're not yet.
I should have been, but hey, yeah. So we're going to move on to the final sort of segment of the podcast now, and talk about football tactics and where do we see it going from here. We'll kick her off with the question from Archie, whose eyes Brainy Brands. Do you think the number 10 will become more prominent in football again soon, or will it continue to be the rise of the fullbacks? Aaron?
I think this question is clearly aimed at Liverpool and how their kind of all their creativity comes through their fullbacks, where you've got midfield packed with grafters and workhorses. So I see what he means. It really depends how much this kind of current generation of footballers inspire the young people that want to kind of become footballers. Like I say, if Liverpool continue as they're going, I'm not. You've got the likes of Trent and Andy Robertson who they've not kind of redefined an attacking fullbacks, which you've had in the past. You've had the likes of Dani Alves and Jordi Alba at Barcelona, but I think fullbacks are kind of becoming a lot more kind of prominent part. And yeah, it's a good question actually, and it's quite an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah, the way I see it is that teams now are starting to realise after, I think it's what it's been, a sort of like a couple of decades long struggle, that you need to be able to defend to win stuff. I feel like once Barcelona broke on the scene with Pep and that, and it was just with death of 1,000 cuts, and it was like you can still beat teams by playing brilliant football. I feel like it's been a trickle down effect, and I think it started when Pep came to the Premier League, where a lot of teams have just avoided being able to have any kind of defensive shape in that, and they've become sort of synonymous with this type of football that requires lots of passing, where if you look before then, most Premier League games average around and under 300 passes. And people talk about now the Premier League being really, really sort of done, uncompetitive, and whatever. I feel like everyone trying to play the same way has caused this, and that's why I feel like the number 10, what Brainy Brands talks about, Archie talks about, I don't think it will be, because I feel like what you've seen now is the teams in the Premier League who are synonymous with playing more functional football, none of them play with a number 10. And if you look at last season, the teams who did better outside of the elite were teams who played more functional football. Now, that isn't me saying everyone in the Premier League is going to be playing a more direct brand of football next season. It's more of a simple case of the Premier League winners don't really play with much passing through the middle of the pitch in terms of side to side, and they use their width, and you've got a striker who has created a new role for himself of being a defensive striker, whatever that's supposed to be. And they play a different way to Man City, who were miles off it. Leicester, who started the season off playing a possession brand of football, fell off the cliff. Sheffield United, who were in Europe, who were in the European chases for most of the season, certainly play more pragmatically. And Norwich, who were lauded for their performance against Man City and whatnot, got relegated comfortably. Eddie Howe's in the mud, and Sean Dyche is flying high in 10th. So what I'm basically saying is, the more these teams do well, I think the more you'll see functional midfield. Terry, have you any thoughts on that? Until you're laughing.
I just had to laugh at Eddie Howe's in the mud. No, I definitely think you're right. I think with tactics, it sort of goes through cycles. Like, formations are the same. Like, whatever's prominent in a particular league and wins the league, or like dominates the league, I think there's a reaction in the seasons that follow immediately after that of formations and tactics to counter that. So 3-4-3 became very popular a couple of years ago when Antonio Conte was doing it at Chelsea. Like, the England team at the World Cup did it as well on the back of that. Other teams started doing it, and there's still teams who are doing a version of it now where they'll play 4 at the back, but one of the full-backs tucks in defensively when they're in possession. Everton are doing it, for example. But I think now the combination of things will start to go back to the more pragmatic manager style, whereas over the last 5 years it's all been about brands of football. Winning was not the thing. It was about, do you play a nice brand of football? But as you said, Eddie Howe is now in the mud, and Bournemouth Eddie Howe and Bournemouth weren't the only ones who did this, but they were a good sort of canary in a coal mine, where they were conceding 70 goals a season every year, and they were getting lauded as having a lovely style of football and brands of football, and it was sort of like not acknowledged that they were terrible defensively and they never achieved anything. It was just, oh, look at this small club and they play it the right way. That was what it was, the right way. Whereas now, Liverpool are, let's be honest, they are a super elite counter-attacking side. They've got excellent players and they do it better than anyone else, and at pace and transition very quickly. But they don't dominate the ball, not unless the opposition team play a pragmatic low block system to frustrate them. That's when they get all the ball. But when they're playing other good teams, they literally just hit them when the other teams come out and go into their half. So what I think we'll see now is a return. We'll see all those style of football type managers, like the right way of playing. They'll all go one after the other now, and you'll see more Sean Dyche, Sam Allardyce even type managers come back in if they can make it an effective low block which gets results and frustrates better teams. That will be more in vogue. You'll see a lot more of that. And as for number 10s, I think they'll just change the way fullbacks changed years ago into you couldn't be like Gary Neville was a defensive right back, wasn't he? He did his part on the ball, but he was primarily a defender, whereas now you've got to be a fast wing player who can also defend. I think number 10 will stop being central players now. They'll start being inside lefts and inside forwards, inside right, sorry, like inside forwards. We're going to see less of them behind the striker and more of them basically paired up with a flying winger. Like you'll see 4-2-2-2 or 4-2-3-1 where the width comes. We're seeing that already, aren't we? But the number 10s won't be a central role allowed to float anymore, because teams have figured out how you smother them and you just pack the midfield with either a double pivot or a 3.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that, in the sense that there's always a trend in football and there's always something that changes, and it always seems to be so I think Bournemouth getting relegated bigger than just another team getting relegated. So I think it's a marker that what they've been doing, their version of recruitment and football tactics, is just nonsense, because they've just been they've been living for too long in the Premier League at this fairy tale sort of ride. I think when they came up originally, they just wanted to be a Southern Blackpool with Ian Holloway, score loads of goals, concede loads of goals, and they kept them up first season and fair play. But the longer they went on, the more it kind of went on long with them, and they had better players than Brett Ormrod and Gary Taylor-Fletcher and that. So it kind of evolved. But now I feel like when you've seen the teams last season and the teams who went down and who were comfortably mid-table, let's not forget it, despite the fact that they had a bad run, Crystal Palace was nice after the day before, and could have easily got into Europe if they didn't have bad injuries. Now, of course, they had a bad run and whatever happened, but they were another one who were doing really well, playing a more difficult brand of football. And George, who is a friend of the podcast, a Palace fan, moaned about the three defensive midfielders earlier. Like, it got them to a point. Sheffield United the same. Obviously, the flagship teams barely what they did last season, and 54 points, playing a more pragmatic way, indicates to me that, Terry, that you're right, that teams are going to shift more towards pragmatism if they've seen that as an example from the previous season. And I think if you saw the previous season to that, I think from 7th to 10th, well, new first season, they were quite an exciting team to watch, relatively speaking, for a newly promoted team. Aaron finished 8th with Silver, who were trying to play attacking football. Rodgers had just come in from Leicester, and 10th was, I think, it was Pellegrini of West Ham, wasn't it? And he was playing the right way, but this year Sheffield United, Burnley, Wolves had gone more pragmatic. Palace have been up there. Even Newcastle defied expectations, really. People thought they would go down, they didn't. I just wonder what we'll see from teams next season. So, in terms of the newly promoted teams, how do you think Leeds, West Brom and Fulham are going to approach sort of tactically to try and stay in the league?
I think I'm most confident in Leeds, just simply down to the fact that they've got Marcelo Bielsa. But you think about the number 10. Marcelo Bielsa has been playing 4-1-4-1 without a number 10. It's kind of more focused on having a hard-working midfielder with a defensive midfielder and two kind of more box-to-box midfielders. So we'll talk about predictions another time, but I think Leeds will. I'm most confident in Leeds to stay up. The other two, I'm not so sure. West Brom, with a few good signings, could kind of fight to the final day. I'm not confident in Fulham, if I'm being brutally honest.
No, me neither. I feel like with Fulham, the reason why I'm not confident in Fulham is for the majority of the season in the Championship, Fulham were playoffs, and literally every game you could read up on it, Fulham had between 68 and 74% possession in most games. If they try and just go into the season and carry on, there's no way they'll be able to keep that up. West Brom, they're an interesting one. They're slightly a bit more pragmatic. I think that's because their recruitment from years back has been more workman-like players, and so Village coming in first season, it's sort of a mix of that with his own sort of imprint. I think that's where he got a success at West Ham first, when he came in on the back of Allardyce. They had that sort of drill routine every week with their defence, and he came in as Pius, Antonio, and so he took it on. The problem with Village therefore after was he couldn't really sustain, and I wasn't his natural sort of game. And then as for Leeds, I'm not sure of Leeds because they were quite similar to Fulham with terms of possession, but I wonder if that's less deliberate in terms of it being more of a fear factor playing Leeds with the players they have, that teams are just dropping off against them more than Leeds having pointless possession. And in the Premier League, with more games being more 50-50, you'll spring on teams a lot quicker. Terry, if you got any ideas about Leeds, Fulham or West Brom, maybe what they could do?
I agree with you both on Fulham. I can't see Fulham sticking around. Just don't think they've got enough quality. Obviously, a good transfer window could change that. I think West Brom will stay up. I think they've got the right manager for it. I think, as you said, they've got the right squad base for it. Obviously, again, they do need more players, but I think they're the most equipped. So, West Brom have been a Premier League team, a lot in recent, the last 20 years. They've come up, they've come down. But if I was to put money on it, I'd say them. I think Leeds will start fantastic. I think everyone will love them, and then they'll fall apart because they always had, under Bielsa, ropey second half of the seasons in the Championship, and it's going to be even harder when they get to the Premier League because the quality is going to be a lot higher. They've gone from swarming over everyone in the Championship. It's not going to fly when you've got much better strikers on the counter-attack and better players. You compete with that. I can see Leeds doing really well for the first few months, and then after Christmas they'll fall off a cliff and they won't be as good.
Yeah, I've said the exact same with Leeds. I've got them 16th and people challenge that. Or what I could see Leeds being like 8th and 9th in December and then going to 16th in the second half of the season just because, but they call it Bielsa burnout, don't they? In terms of he asks that much of his team at first. They sort of peak around Christmas and then from Christmas onwards they sort of slow down. The thing what saved them this time was the break in terms of so they have that recharging and then they could go again. I just find it interesting to see how differently the likes of Leeds and West Brom and Fulham will approach it compared to Norwich, who we're just going to play our way and see where it takes us, and they didn't get a little over 20 points in the end. As for the top of the league, Man City and Liverpool, they're surely just going to continue what they're going to do. Do you see any in the middle pack out, just things like the Wolves and Leicester and Everton and that? What do you think there'll be any patterns there in terms of the way teams are playing, or do you think it's just the as you were, really, Aaron?
I'm not expecting too much change, but kind of in the middle of the table. I'm looking at the predictions I've made that will continue to change until I kind of make a final prediction. But I think Southampton ended the season very, very well. They play some good stuff. Their system works. Personally, Southampton are a dark horse for me. Other than that, you've got the likes of Sheffield United, who, again, they play some good stuff. They're well drilled. They know exactly what they're doing. I don't think they'll have a season like they did last year, but they'll be comfortable. They'll be mid-table. I'm looking. You've got the likes of Leicester, who will drop off. Burnley, who are solid mid-table nowadays. So I'm not expecting too much change, but it's very interesting to see how the middle of the table will look.
Yeah, I think in terms of what you said about Leicester, I'm going to find Leicester interesting because they struggled the second half of the season when teams sort of they were afforded space in the first half of the season when teams were going at them. When it got to Christmas and teams realised they were a threat really because they were second, teams sat back against them and they struggled. Terry, do you have any idea, any advance on Leicester? What do you think they're going to do?
I can see Leicester not performing as well. Like you say, people sort of sussed them out within last season, didn't they? And the season before that, they finished. Did they finish 7th or did we finish 7th? No, they finished 9th. 9th. We finished 8th. I think they'll fall off into around that area again. They'll finish like 7th, 8th, 9th. Because other teams have figured them out. I can see Man United improving. Obviously, it depends on their transfer dealing, but Fernandes really did sort of make things click for them and tie it together. If they do get Sancho, I can see that having a similar impact. I think Chelsea are going to do an upmarket version of what we did in 2017. I don't think any of it's going to gel straight away. They're trying to do too much too quickly. And they're doing what Arsenal traditionally have done, where they buy loads of attacking players but don't sort out a crap defence.
Yeah.
You can have Kai Havertz and Timo Werner and all that all you want. You've still got Kepa in goal and Zuma at the back.
Yeah.
There's no. It's just going to be like Arsenal. I can see teams doing. The teams who will do better. I think Wolves will go from strength to strength. They'll carry on. Can see Arsenal being marginally better because I think Arteta's a decent manager by the looks of things. Don't know where Everton will come. Depends on transfers. I think we'll be a lot better with a full season of Ancelotti, but it will be because of Ancelotti. It's mad that we've got a better manager than Chelsea and Man United. Like, it's just stupid.
Everton are heavily reliant on what transfers they make, because for me, get in the field, they should be in the top 10. Get everything else, like a right back, a couple wingers, then they start pushing on towards Europe. But right now, I can see them finishing like 11th or 13th.
Yeah, with this team, we would probably do no better. We probably finished between 12th and 10th. But I think with the right signings, we'll leapfrog Sheffield United and Burnley again, because they as good as they are, they've got a ceiling. They won't, they haven't got manager like ours. They haven't got players like ours. They haven't got the resources we've got. Don't think we'll jump into Europe, certainly not. But I think we might jump into 7th with the right transfers and try and build from there. But I don't know. It's going to be hard because it's not just the top 6 anymore. It's Wolves as well and Leicester. But one team I think everyone's sleeping on is Spurs. I think Spurs with Mourinho will work. I still think Mourinho's got it. He didn't fit at Man United, but he's not lost what he's good at. It's still Mourinho. I can see Spurs being in the top 4 next season, alongside the top 2 and Man United. I think that'll be the top 4.
I've got them third, and I think that's mainly because of the Mourinho factor. I feel like in games towards the end of the season, he was in his elements with the way them games went. He just had his team on the counter-attack, and he looked brilliant at times. After they beat us scruffily because they had that bad result at Sheffield United, from them on, he just battered teams, and he just sat back, soaked up the pressure, and just hit teams. If they could do that for a full year, they'll be third, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm really torn on Spurs. I personally don't think their players are great, mainly in defence. But it is interesting to see how Mourinho does, because he's obviously still a great manager. But I could easily see Spurs finishing kind of 3rd or 4th. I could easily see them finishing in 6th. It's quite a tough one, and again, it is quite reliant on how they act in the market.
Yeah, I think that will be it for now for this pod. I just want to end on something that Alfie, who's a friend and a contributor to the podcast, said last night, that David Moyes has done a better job at West Ham than Mourinho and Ancelotti have done at Everton and Tottenham. So, I mean, yeah, that's not the half of the nonsense he comes out with. That just reminds me of the middle of the table. I'm sure he'll be listening. We'll probably get a message when this is out saying, "Why am I getting another mention on the podcast?" Just because you enlighten our day, Alfie. Well, that will be it for episode 6 of the podcast. The next one I'll be coming out will be a predictions video. Me and Aaron and other people will be doing that. Thanks for Terry for coming on.
No problem. Pleasure to be here. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. And we'll see you next time.